And welcome aboard Creators Corner. My name is Chris Barrows. This is my first Creators Corner in a while. I am long overdue. I think Ryan's done the last batch of these, but really excited tonight to be back. We've got David from Grumpy Spider Games here. David, welcome to the Tabletop Express.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, I'm excited too. I want to just give a little bit of backstory before we get into kind of a little bit more about what you've been up to. But the reason that I initially even reached out to you was Brian Chandler, who has definitely done quite a few things here on our channel, had posted a tweet and it featured it featured your upcoming game. And I was immediately drawn to it. And I think if anyone looks at that intro slide that we had, they kind of saw a glance of it. So I'm so excited to talk a little bit more about that today and the process by which you came up with that. But David, I got to start with the question that I ask everyone on this show, which is, what is your board game origin story? The game or the games that kind of got you interested in the hobby?
So, board games weren't really much of a thing to me until just a few years ago, really. It's really started with my brother, who co-founded Grumpy Spider Games with me. Um, he has been into board gaming for a long time. He designs games. Really, it's just like a hobby. He doesn't never really planned for it to be any bigger than that. Just family and friends sort of thing. But we were going up. All the family was getting together for Christmas of 2018, and he called me up and he said, "We got to spend some time. I just came up with this game. It's amazing. I'm really excited about it." So I figured, sure, and yeah, I'll play it with you. I mean, I'm not against board games. It just wasn't really a thing to me. And we played that game with 5 or 6 of us. It was just a short, party game, similar to Apples, and vaguely similar. Um, and we had just the best time playing this game. Um, so after we were done with this, I guess playtest session or whatever you want to call it, I said, I pulled him off to the side and I said, I really like this game. Out of all the other ones you've done and everything. Um, so I want to help you make this happen. And I said at that point, like, I didn't know anything about the board gaming publishing. I didn't realize that like this space is as big as it is, and I didn't even know it was called publishing. Like, do you publish a board game? Do you make them? Do you what? I don't know. But I said I don't know what you would call it, but I want to help you make this a real game that real people play. And so we founded Grumpy Spider Games, and that game was Rucksack, which is now published. But during that process, in that next 9 or 10 months, um, that's when I got into Twitter and Facebook and some of these groups on Reddit and things, and realized how big the space was. What all these other, I knew what Settlers of Catan was. Like that's about where I was. And from there, I ran into Button Shy Games, which I'm a huge fan of now. Um, and I did one of the earliest ones was Overboss. I found their Kickstarter. I love that game. So I've really gotten into it a lot more now, but it's just been a couple of years, so I'm pretty much a newbie still.
It's interesting you mention it though, because I think a lot of people, even if they played, say, the olders call them the classic games. A lot of people, I think, come back to rediscover Button Shy. I love that you mentioned them because I'm always blown away. We were talking about this last night on the table about the fact that 18 card games that somehow are as good as they are. It's incredible to me. Blows my mind
Oh yeah,
on a daily basis. I think you even were on a Twitter thread with Media Videra, so you like it, where you know there's one game out there now where they were playing around with just playing a game, TTRPG game from your phone, and I was blown
oh
away.
yeah, yeah.
I was blown away because I end up getting engaged and start saying, "Oh no, but doesn't work on this screen because there's a home icon here." They're like, "Oh, we got to fix that," and they fixed it with that moment. So the world is obviously much bigger. But let's talk about your world with this, because you came in and the first game, is that the first game that you guys tried to do on Kickstarter? Because I know you had some early Kickstarter experiences and then some lessons learned in your time publishing games.
Yeah, the first game that we tried was Rucksack, and it took 2 tries, 2 Kickstarter launches, to get it out there, but it's out there now, and now we're working on our second game, which is coming out next Tuesday. So just a week
That's
from today.
that's right. And we could talk about some of the development, the lessons learned, but I really do want to talk about the one that got my attention. So if you could tell everybody a little bit what's coming out, because it's different. And I think I just want to just it's different for me than anything I've quite seen, because it quite literally needs a pencil. That's the biggest, most important thing you need. There's games that need a pencil, but this is something you could take on the go with you. It was such a neat concept of this on the go game that fits in your backpack, especially people going back to work. In the office is probably a little bit more than they were. Talk a little bit about this game and kind of how this came to be.
So I will admit that the beginnings of it, I actually got highly inspired by another game. I don't know if you run into Paper Apps Dungeon.
I am not familiar with that one. It sounds like I should be, but I am not.
So it did much better on Kickstarter than he was ever expecting. It was one of those make 100. He thought it would just be a small thing, no one, and he ended up like 15,000 copies or something. I think is what ended up being ordered. Um, but that was back in January of last year that he did this. I think it was. And the whole idea of the game was just boil down the dungeon crawling experience to a simple memo pad. Just one of those you just flip over and you have a pencil and a die, and you just go through and it's a simple little maze or whatever. So I saw that last year, I think April or May of last year, and thought this is such a neat idea that you can just put it in your pocket and go. And I said, I really want to make something like that, but I want it to be maybe a little bit meatier, because he did a great job really just honing in on exactly what makes a dungeon crawler and nothing else, just really very, very focused. And I thought, well, I want to make it a little bit meatier than that. And I'd also like to make it even more travel friendly. So Paper Apps Dungeon, you have the pad, you have the pencil, and a die. You have to roll a die to see where you move. And I thought, well, how can I get rid of the die? So all I need is the book and a pencil. And from there, you can just, explore your dungeon and fight your baddies and all that.
And I want to actually just give everybody a look. You sent me a few images, so I have one. I just make sure it's loaded properly. Um, but I think the concept of one, I love the concept that on the go you can do this kind of thing. But just throwing this up on the screen for everybody to see a quick overlay. But this is kind of that concept of pocketbook adventures. You can see obviously it's ready to go on the go with you. I'm assuming I don't have to be the best artist in the world to do this well. Like it's fairly basic in terms of me being able to go through, because it looks like the art in it was pretty simple, but it was really neat. I was looking at just some of the visuals of like the monsters or the creatures in it. I didn't want to get too spoiled, to be candid. I didn't want to spoil myself completely. But it seemed like overall very basic shapes. Kind of anyone can do this. Really accessible. I know even Brian had written, and Brian Chandler, for anyone who hasn't seen it, does colorblindgames.com, wrote that it's a solid dungeon crawl experience in a small package, and this is important, visual accessibility is excellent, which I imagine the grayscale probably helps with quite a bit.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, yeah. It's all done just black ink, because I wanted to give it the idea of like the old Game Boy game, something like that. It's just black and white, and it feels almost like you're playing an old vintage video game.
Yeah, and because there's enough out there of I feel like we're getting more into the choose your own adventure. There's a lot more about choose your own adventure, but I do think that retro feel still is very in. I mean, you mentioned
Oh yeah.
Overboss, or Overboss, and there's other
Mhm.
games like that. People dig that still, so that certainly kind of I think just works for people. But the level building, and when you talk about building something out, are you building out really a true journey where when you do this, that people are going to immerse themselves in, or is it more as they're playing they feel like it's a one-off adventure in each one? Because obviously it feels like all the gameplay in it, you can probably play one of the pages within 10 to 15 minutes, save it, and then come back to it later on based on everything I was reading.
Yeah, each page. I mean, each time you turn a page, it's a new level, entirely new dungeon, and it takes 10, maybe 15 minutes. I would say tops per level usually. Um, but what's nice about it is, even though it feels kind of one off, you take your stats with you. So it is a campaign type game where you start off, with hot 5 life points, and you slowly build and you slowly get stronger and stronger monsters and can take more damage and that sort of thing. So you find weapons early on and you can carry them throughout the game. Um,
So then in that sense, yeah, definitely campaign you're building up. It is again a very interesting choice when it came down to the actual the format of obviously a portable book that you can bring with you. What's the biggest difference? Because obviously I've seen some photos online from prototypes that you sent out, but is there a big difference that comes in when it comes to Kickstarter, albeit thicker pages or something like that? Because usually prototypes I know aren't the final product, generally speaking, with this sort of thing.
right. Yeah, I planned for the final product to be just a little bit larger. We had some issues with the margins in our prototypes. So the game itself won't be any larger, but the margins on the pages will. So you don't have to worry about anything being cut off or close to cut off. And like you mentioned, thicker pages, things like that. So you'll see some of the reviewers will show pictures where you can kind of see a little bit of the page, bleeding through on the other side. That's going to be gone. We've already tested out, different types of paper and everything, so that will be gone. It will be a little bit thicker, just slightly larger. Still able to fit in your pocket because that would be terrible if it were called something like that and it couldn't. But
When it comes down to it, when you think of a game like this, you obviously did your play testing. What was the play testing process like on something like this for you? How, what was the kind of feedback that you were given along the way to kind of drive any, whether it be, simple changes, something like you mentioned, changes in bosses, things like that. What was the experience of going through playtesting, especially having done a game before, that albeit was quite different. So, what was that playtesting experience like, and how did it differ from the first one for you?
yeah, it was quite a bit different. With the first one being a party game, typically you want to play with lots of people right there, see their reaction, see how they handle things. This is a solo game, so it has been 100% blind playtesting. I've never actually been right there with them to see. Well, now there's been some streamers live streaming, and so I've been there to watch that, I guess. But um, and it's all been through Twitter, uh, friends on Twitter or Instagram that I've reached out to. But they'll play it, and then they ask me any questions they have. Gave me a couple of good ideas, especially early on. When it's still kind of a bare bones thing. Um, so it's really helped. It's really helped a lot. And I don't know, honestly, I don't know how much different it would have been had I just been sitting there watching, over their shoulders to see how they were doing, because that just would be odd to me to watch a solo game like that. But
But does the increased interest? I have to wonder. There's been an increased interest in solo experiences as a whole. I was just talking about, just as an example, the other night with Pencil First Games, that I always include a solo experience of some kind. Solo as a whole have become bigger and more important than ever. I feel like even in big games, you put a large game on the table that takes you 30 minutes to set up. A lot of people are just doing those solo. I mentioned Merchant's Cove. I know a ton of people who do Merchant's Cove, which is a huge table hog, and it's people love it solo. So did that impact any bit of the interest on the solo side or interest in solo? Was this always going to be a thing you'd want to do, whether solo was a big interest in the industry or not?
I think it was mostly for myself. Um, so we were still having the effects of the pandemic and things. Um, that's when I noticed the solo gaming, really pick up, which makes sense. Um, and that's what several of the games that I have are solo as well. So it was just kind of like I don't know. I want to design games that I would like to play, and at this point, it's solo games. So
It's funny. Jim, Jim, who's done, oh God, Cosmic Frog as an example. Another one said the exact same thing. I design games for me. When he was on a few weeks back, he had jumped on in the middle of Call Aboard and said, "Hey," and he kind of commented, "I make games for me," and I don't think anyone is alone in that. I feel like a lot of people are designing it, but maybe the best games come from the heart in that sense. And in this particular case, I'm fascinated by obviously the concept, the portability of it. I do want to bring up a comment, by the way. Board Game Dads is here, and he says, "I remember you asking for some feedback on the logo." So you really took to social, and I think that's so important nowadays for many obvious reasons. I don't even need to say, but you took to social to really get that feedback, to get this in the hands of people who maybe you didn't even know. It sounds like, and just to get kind of that information that could help you make a better game. It was how critical would you say social was to your process?
I don't know if the game would even exist without it. I mean, um, Board Game Dads mentioning that I asked about the logo. Grumpy Spider is very small. We have no money, so I mean, I am not a graphic designer, but I thought, well, I need to come up. This style is very, very trimmed down, just black and white. Hard lines. Maybe I can do something here. So I tried my hand out on a couple of different ideas that I had, and came up with this little pencil sword. Actually, it was a friend of mine on Twitter that said, "Hey, why don't you do a pencil as a sword?" And I thought, well, that's a really neat idea. So messed around with that and came up with the logo.
That's great. Like I said, and again, I mean, I'm here talking to you. My first interaction with you was, quite frankly, because I saw someone post a photo, and it goes just to show the power of what the community has when they are sharing. And it does not matter the size of your channel, doesn't matter who you are. Some random person who's played the game suddenly shares it, and boom, you're interested. What is that game? I always think about Facebook groups when someone posts a photo and they don't include the name of the game. It's like, what the heck am I looking at? It's that same kind of vibe of, I want to know more about this. One of the things you did talk to me about a little bit before we went live too was, even when it comes to doing Kickstarter, just the research. You mentioned quite a bit of the fact that, when you were reading wasn't enough. The learning and the doing was quite impactful. What do you take from your past experience as you go into a new Kickstarter? I mean, you're coming up essentially a week away right now. What do you do to take from past, both success and failure, to make another successful Kickstarter in your third go around?
Yeah, some of the big things I think were keeping the backers engaged. Our first campaign was very small, but I think that was one of the things that we did really well on. And I'd like to try to do that here as well, um, with just the different updates during the campaign, all of that. Just keep the backers involved and feeling like they're a part of this process. They're just as important as anyone else that has touched this thing. Uh, so that's a big thing that I want to carry on into this one.
And the people being a part of it, I think is so critical, especially as you mentioned, a smaller, as being smaller in terms of just everything from team to what you've done thus far. You go out there, you're marketing, and when you're communicating to people, it's huge. People need that. When people go silent, I've seen some Kickstarters where people just, they don't know what's going on, and it's been a month and a half, and they just want to know, hey, is everything good? Uh, it's fascinating to me how quickly, and there's a lot of management that obviously goes into a Kickstarter. So how do you prepare your time then to put the time aside for that? Because you don't know how many people are going to jump on this. This could blow up and be funded in 10 minutes for all you know. And suddenly you're looking at the middle of your day, with everything else going on in your life, family, work, whatever it might be, having to respond to something. So how do you actually plan for that? Because Kickstarter period, I only imagine for those who are funding something, feels like a very long period of time, even if it's only 15 days or only 20 days, within the year.
Yeah, yeah. The campaign itself is just going to be crazy. Um, but I think one of the things is if we hit a very successful campaign, which obviously I hope for, I think it's important to set expectations for the backers. And in a positive way, just say, "Hey, we are a small publisher. We'll get to all of your questions and your comments. Trust me, we'll get to them. But it's only me. My brother's going to be helping some, um, so it will take a little while. If we have hundreds, thousands, whatever it might be. Obviously, if it's just a few hundred, it's not going to be much of a wait to get your questions answered. But just setting the expectations up front to let them know, hey, I'm here, I see you, I will respond. Uh, and I have seen from my own experience on Kickstarter how much just letting them know that, how much backers just appreciate, oh, that I know that you are not just disappearing. You already let me know, okay, and how much they appreciate that. I mean, just something so simple.
Now, the other thing I think that's really obviously with any Kickstarter now that when we talk about it, Kickstarter, GameFound, it doesn't matter. Um, the shipping and other things. How is shipping different from a process, if at all, with something like this, or just even getting the ultimate product created when you're dealing with something that is, uh, for the most part, paper, right, as compared
Mm-hmm.
to plastic, and obviously distinct differences. And I'm not talking the financial part, but just from the manufacturing to getting out to shipping. Is it a really different process as you prepare compared to your last time? Or is it's still a lot of the same because the challenge is still of shipping from wherever it may be going and then getting to people still involved working with all these companies that have to do the same job.
Yeah, this one is actually going to be quite a bit different with production and shipping because, like you mentioned, it's not your traditional. It's a notebook. It's paper, and you've got some coil binding, some metal binding. So as far as like pricing, it's way cheaper to ship. It's a lot cheaper to produce. You can do it right here. We actually plan to produce it right here in Chattanooga, which is where Grumpy Spiders is founded, based. So we'll be producing it right here. We don't have to worry about extra costs coming in from Asia or wherever many other board games are being produced, and that will also cut down a lot on the time and give us a um, be much more on board with exactly how the game is done. We don't have to make any sort of guessing or hope that nothing's lost in translation or anything like that. So yeah, it'll be a lot different than your I think what your typical board game how it's produced.
Yeah, I've watched it with so many games now. I've talked to so many designers and illustrator. It doesn't matter. They've all cited the same thing, but it's really. I love to hear obviously the fact that that's got to be great for you for one, but I'm sure backers are excited to hear that too. Anytime you hear because it is a different relationship, right? When you think about this now as backers of something, we do have to understand prices are up. So you talked about setting expectations. That's the same kind of thing, right? Setting expectation of realistically, this is what we're going for, but making sure that people also understand what the market looks like. And as a smaller publisher, you don't probably have as much leeway. You can't take as big of a hit as easily as someone like a Gameland Games or something like that. It's just
Right.
not feasible, I imagine.
No, it really isn't. So that's one of the things um, that this game is going to help with so much
Yeah.
because it is a lot cheaper, even if our estimates end up being off, which is possible.
Right.
Um, they're not going to be off by much because it's already such a small package, which is really nice. Kind of makes it easy for us to go to sleep at night not having to worry about that.
Let's talk about kind of the package that they're getting though. So the book about how long when you talk about people playing this, how long do you estimate it takes to get through average player through the entire kind of journey? that they get to go on with this?
So from what I can tell, it takes anywhere from 6 to 10 hours to play through the entire game. Um, and that's hard. It's hard to say because when I play it, I'm so used to it now. I'm like, oh yeah, you do this now, and you do this, and all this. Here's the puzzle. I remember how to fix it or how to solve it. But there's almost half of the levels in the game are puzzles. So that could be, I mean, depends on how good you are at solving it. So that might be a 30-minute map for all I know. But we're generally designed to be between 5 and 15 minutes. And there's 50 maps and then some towns thrown in and some bosses on top of that too. So I'm
Oh, I love
guessing
that.
6 to 10 hours.
Oh, that's great. So there's a lot of value in there. I want to do pro up, by the way. Brian stopped by and said hi, but he wanted to drop and say hi, and that he's excited for Pocketbook Adventures. So, thank you, Brian, for coming by tonight. No, I like I said, I think that it's like anything. You could also do a speed run through Super Mario Brothers in 5 minutes or 50, whatever. I've seen the speed runs. It doesn't make it, you know, fun in my opinion. But you could do. Some people can move through a game a lot quicker. I once saw someone do a speed run of Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time in some insane amount of time, and I don't know how they did it. And I'm still blown away by these things. But let's, outside of a world of games, though, I'd love to get to know you a little bit, David. What are you outside of board games? What are the kind of things that you're up to? What are the kind of things that you have an interest or a passion in, and the stuff that we might find you doing when you're not designing a board game?
Oh, well, mostly right now, if I'm not designing, it's going to be my kids. My wife and my kids have spent a lot of time together, um, which is great. They're as amazing as they are frustrating sometimes, but I love them to death. Um, Occasionally, and when a miracle happens and we actually have some time, my wife and I both like to go hiking, which is nice since we're based in Chattanooga. There's plenty of hiking around, and the kids are getting just old enough now where they can almost go with us. We might have to carry them some of the way, but
That's awesome.
that's
The hiking experience I can wait to. We've got multiple trails near us here in New Jersey, and it's such a fun experience once the kids are able to do it. My 9-year-old can, my 4-year-old, it's another story. Um, Keeping her at attention is a whole brand new game compared to my son at that age. And parenting, I can definitely equate to. I want to make sure I do say too, um, for anyone who is interested in this game, it is like David said, this Kickstarter is coming out quickly. Can you give a little bit of the details on the Kickstarter, and just make sure, let everybody know when the Kickstarter is coming out, and then what I will do for everybody, and of course I'll grab a link from you, David, once it's live, or even the preview page. We'll make sure we drop a link in the show notes if anyone's interested in learning more about this. I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and do that. But David, can you tell everybody a little bit about when the Kickstarter is coming, and hopefully what they can expect, kind of from the Kickstarter campaign as a whole?
yeah. So the game will be live on Kickstarter October 4th, so it's next Tuesday, a week from today, and then ending on the 27th. So I like to keep my campaigns fairly short. I think it's a little over 3 weeks, um, just for sanity's sake, I suppose. Um, so it's not going to be on Kickstarter um, for quite as long as what they default to. Um, but yeah, it should hopefully be good. I've got quite a few other reviewers coming in. Um, that's one of the things that I think will really help a lot. I sent more review copies than I care to admit I made. It took forever, but uh, but a lot of those will be coming in after the campaign starts to help keep engagement up, and I'm excited to see what people think of it.
Yeah, there was a comment earlier I want to share, from Board Game Dads of, can't wait for the first time to see someone with the game in the wild. What a great feeling that'll be. And I can only, I feel like what's so neat about this project is it is something that you could see in the quote unquote wild. I mean, people could be walking around with something like this. So that's such a neat feeling. It seems like you've got a great local vibe to it too. So it feels like something that for all you know, you see it around your community. And I do appreciate. I really want to note I appreciate the fact of and sharing what you did share about even from a shipping perspective because it's so different than anyone else. Anyone else has had to go through China no matter what. There was no option, right? You've got some options to do it. I think the way you're trying to do it is really cool. Um, I will ask because someone had asked me to ask this before. With the Kickstarter campaign, it's pretty straightforward Kickstarter campaign. You got some surprises in store. If you can't tell me all that, I totally understand. I understand you got some secrets, right? But had some people wondering, is it are we going to have some surprises, things to unlock, or maybe some social media goals, or something that we can all look forward to kind of being a part of while this campaign is ongoing?
Yeah, this one I think is going to be a little bit more straightforward. One of the things that I learned from our previous Kickstarter campaigns was um, even though it's trying to strike a balance, particularly for a small publisher, it's hard to strike a balance between um, keeping people engaged and just constantly going. Where I mean, you put everything else aside for 3 4 weeks, and like you're just dead by
Right.
it. So this one, I thought, okay, well, why don't we'll go. I'll try to keep backers more engaged, definitely updates and things like that, just bare minimum. But reviewers will be going out a lot during the campaign. But apart from that, I'd like to keep the actual campaign itself and the page a little bit more minimalistic, um, matching the game itself being so minimal. You just need a book and a pencil. It's hopefully what you see from the reviewers and the game will speak for itself.
I do want to point out too, by the way, because I was looking before and on Board Game Geek, where someone had posted a photo and it's the box for Hanabi next to a photo of a notebook just to show you just how pocket size it is. And I thought it was just such a great comparison. I encourage people to go take a look at some of the visuals of this. Take a look. Again, it drew my attention to the point that I think I reached out to you within like a minute of seeing Brian's post. So I'm really glad that he shared it. I want to thank everybody else who did share it as well because some cool photos are out there. I want to thank you for taking some time to be with us here on the Tabletop Express today to talk a little bit about this. I'm wishing you the best of luck first and foremost. This is like I said, to me, a really neat project. It stood out amongst a lot of the same that I see on Kickstarter. And I really wish you the best of luck. I hope you, supersede your goal here. And I'm going to encourage everybody to go take a look October 2nd, see if you're interested in this. Like I said, it's definitely one that I encourage you to look at the visuals. I think they'll know pretty quickly if this is something for them or not. Um, Anything that you want to add, before we come to a close here? Anything you'd want to share, be it more about the game or any thank yous or something along those lines that you just would love to let people know about?
Yeah, well, first off, I really want to take some time to thank the people. There's so many friends of mine on Twitter. Um, I haven't met any of these people in real life. Like, why are they helping me so much? But they do, and the whole board game community has just been incredible. How friendly and helpful they are, and I try to give back as I can as well. But I mean, just the first time asking for posting one photo of the game and asking for playtesters and getting like 20 people, half of whom I'd never even met before. There's sure, yeah, I'll try it out. I'll let you know what I think. All this, um, and this game, even though I'm the designer, so many of the ideas have come from somebody else in the board game community that has put in even just a little bit of time to help, and it's incredible.
That's awesome, and I want to take a moment to also say thank you to those who tuned in tonight. If you tune in after the fact and have any questions, I'll certainly be happy to share. But I want to thank David for joining us. I don't have any other next stuff coming up on the channel. We'll have another call aboard pretty soon. Definitely some more Creators Corners in the loop. Thank everybody who has tuned in. I do want to give a shout out. If anyone has not had a chance, I want to encourage you to, when you see Call Board coming up, just please come check it out. It's we're doing live discussions, and you can be part of a show. So you can be on camera just like David is now. You could just come on as audio. Don't have to show your face either if you choose not to. But we're having so much fun with Call Board, and I really want to encourage people to come on by. We've had new people popping in every week, and Jim Belly, Rules in here. We got just a lot of awesome folks coming by. So we'd love for one of those to be you. So if you're listening to this, definitely want to encourage that. I want to thank David. David, again, best of luck on the Kickstarter. We'll certainly be cheering you on. And like I said, that is for everybody watching. 1 week from today, if you're watching live, or October 2nd, if you're just looking at the calendar. So go check out Kickstarter, and we'll have a link in the show notes for this appropriately once it goes live. David, thank you for coming aboard the Tabletop Express, and to everybody else out there, we'll see you really soon. Thanks for being with us tonight.